Okay, let's get slowly started. The beginning is a little bit to set the scene about why do we want to control something in the first place and steer it with some entertainment involved. So I will just get started a little bit early today. In the usual way, I've given you reading references. In Harvey's book, it's actually a selection of chapters. You will see they're relatively brief, so it's actually chapter 13, 15, 16, and 17. Yeah, so that is a reference for the people that are passionate about reading in a textbook with case studies. If you prefer the academic journals, then I've given you here two that are very good as well and set a little bit the scene and potential shifts at the moment. Yeah. So why do we actually have project control and steering in the syllabus? Arguably, it's probably one of the core functions of the project manager, if the role is singled out. And I wanted to give you a little bit food for thought with a quote from Douglas Adams. He's more renowned probably for his comedy than his insights into project management, but he had here very important insight that is a little bit entertaining and probably gives you food for thought. I love deadlines. I particularly like the whooshing noise they make as they go flying by. Yeah, so there's a notion here that is of course hidden. Yeah, and that's if you are not aware of what you are measuring and when the deadline is and how to get there, then you kind of miss the point, of course. Yeah, and then it's just a whooshing sound that goes by. So project control is in a way about measurement, not what we can measure, but to measure project relevant stuff. Yeah. I'm teaching as well an undergraduate degree in the final year, and this is very concerning email that I get repeatedly. What is the word count? Yeah, just because you can count it is not a good idea. That is a key measurement. Yeah? So in some cases it is, to be fair. Yeah? So but it depends. Yeah? So project control has to do with measurement. And especially if we want to steer proactive, we have to measure in a way that it's actually meaningful to our project. So communicating across it. So I couldn't resist and put another opposing view in, and that is deeply embedded in society, somewhere hidden. And that comes from a particular movie. Actually, it's not a movie, it's a television series that reported about mission control and steering actually a large program. Yeah, so here's a joke. Sir Richards points out, standard foreign office response on a time of crisis. In stage 1, we say that nothing is going to happen. Sir Humphrey adds, stage 2, we say something may be going to happen, but we should do nothing about it. And then Sir Richards adds again, stage 3, we say that maybe we should have done something about it, but there's nothing we can do. And last but not least, Sir Humphrey rounds it up and says, stage 4, we say maybe there is something we could have done, but it's too late to do now something anyway. Yeah, so it's too late basically. Yeah. So this is of course when you have literally ignored project control on its highest level. This is of course again, yeah, so there may be something to recognize here, especially when it comes to planning and identifying as well work time against it. That is here very deep. Okay, how do we normally do this project control and steering? And it's very easy. It's normally the question, how is it going? And this is often it. So at project stage, this is probably the most prosaic question that we repeatedly ask. But of course, this is an implicit notion that we have to unfold, to actually create a little bit more awareness. I have recently colleagues that I'm working on an international research project. And what was fascinating to me is we get now new emails. They send you an email and ask, how far are you with your project part? part. And then the question is a percentage. 25%, 50%, or 75%? Yeah, this is bad questions. So how is it going is actually a better one. Yeah, so if it's a question of breaking, of course, down our activities. So to break it down a little bit, it's a focus on characteristics that require control in your project. What would be an example for that? What is a classic one? What are our classic ones in project management? It's not a trick question, don't worry. What do we normally look for in a project?
Schedule time.
Yeah. Schedule, are we actually in the anticipated time frame, budget, yeah? And there was one more? Yeah. Okay, quality or scope, yeah, or what you're trying to deliver, yeah? And the parts that are required to actually achieve this, yeah? So, yeah, it's literally at the beginning, your project kind of defines, in a sense, what you're controlling and what you're focusing on. Yeah, and there's a strong influence from strategy by defining what you're actually supposed to control. So if you have sustainability indicators that Alex has probably put close to you, then it is well important that this is included, that you're trying to measure and give as well the team feedback where we are in the project actually on this. Are we hitting our targets, or are we just doing what Adam Douglas is suggesting? We see the milestones whooshing past without actually seeing them. Yeah? And then, of course, it's as well a question of devices that actually assist us in controlling the process, in doing it, yeah, to deliver, if you want. The objective is, of course, in that case, to maximize visibility of progress and performance measures. So there's a draconian notion of project control. This is accountability. So I have a few former literature references that were really used that way. It was a justification being in the project, but nowadays we actually want to have it as a visibility tool of refining this question of how are you doing. This is literally what we are after. And we do so by visualizing it with different techniques and tools. So we have the classical ones that are sometimes a little bit outdated, but it's a Gantt chart and associated tools. But we measure as well the performance in terms of how we actually deliver the elements. Be as well careful with this, whilst total control has been widely promoted, unfortunately, as well in the PM literature. Quite often, and most projects, it's simply not necessary. And what is a trade-off with total control? What do you demise?
Motivation.
Yeah, motivation can be one. Yeah. Motivation. What is a hidden motivation aspect behind it?
Maybe you're not free like to do the way you want.
Yeah.
You're controlled by somebody else.
Yeah. If you recruit in your team, you have to give that trust in the initial point to allow them to perform what they are actually coming in for. Yeah. So total control can undermine the trust. Yeah? And people feel that they don't get the responsibility that they deserve. Yeah. So you will see in the project management literature, we have kind of we are torn between worlds. The new APM book from UK is as well quite control focused. Yeah, so just be aware of that. This probably comes out when you plan your first party or something like that, or a nice dinner with friends. Yeah, be careful. Too much control and nobody wants to attend. It's too rigid. Are you attending at 6 o'clock for the dinner table? Yeah, so this is when you have a protocol, you're being seated, and then now we are starting with the soup. Yeah, so this is then too much. Yeah, that is not a nice dinner anymore. This is kind of work. Yeah. Actually, I attend occasionally dinners like this. Yeah, so it feels really like work. It means as well you have to eat your soup in the time given. Yeah? This is very important. Don't talk too much. Yeah? This is my lesson learned. I had problems with this. My soup was taken from me. That's all I'm saying at that point. Yeah. Okay. So what do we normally focus on? Heroically, and this is unfortunately the most common dominator, you can probably refine it depending on what industry you're going in. Those are the entry points to our project control. And I write here already for review and feedback. So I've already adjusted this a little bit. It's normally people. Often this is described in the literature for the keywords human resource. I'm not a big fan of the keywords, but again, this is if you want to find the relevant literature. So we deal here with people. We can arguably control people, but I would probably prefer to put it the other way around and say we are at the heart of motivation and giving a feedback loop to our team, and as well to ourselves, seeing where we actually are in the project. Have we achieved our milestone to initiate the project successfully, that everybody is actually in on it, or are there people that are actually not giving the feedback and don't seem to be aware that we are starting the project? So those are notions of it. Then heroically, this is further brought down into, by the way, this, I have already adjusted it in a dangerous way. The theory behind this is actually 4 M's. So it was initially man, machine, materials, money. So just so you know. But anyway, the machines is another aspect. So in our project, do we interact always with humans, or are we interacting with databases, or do we have like how do you interact? Do you have machines that actually do the work that normally people do, or is it already quite common that machines do actually the work? So this is then the emphasis. Then as well materials that you are using. This is potentially if you integrate the whole supply chain from the aggregates or resources that are being sub-assembled in other supply chain elements to the final product that you are managing. And then money with its all with its unfolding financial mechanisms and financial vehicles of delivering projects. Do you pay upfront everybody? Or do you pay half first for turning up and then the other half afterwards? So there's well implications with this. And other elements that we can actually control quite easily is space, giving access to space, equipping space properly. Then time, debatable, you can actually set durations, similar with tasks, work quantities that you're expecting. And often quality and technical performance are as well specified. Okay, this was today's first lecture, but now we have to unfold it a little bit and make sense of it. So where does it actually take us? Inputs, those are traditionally the inputs. If you start really clustering that from an initial like stakeholder expectations point, so you ask the client if he has like time constraints when he wants to have it. My favorite engineering projects were actually without the time frame. The really old ones was just, I want to have a pyramid, make it happen. And there was not necessarily a time constraint except maybe the life of the pharaoh that wanted to be embedded there. So I'm not sure that is an accurate description, but you will find a lot of projects that go larger that have that actually, where we are actually just after the outcome. So then, of course, money constraints, resource constraints, material usage. So how do we actually deal with this? Then if you can break it already down into tasks, sometimes it's systems. Then it gets a little bit more tricky. And then again, quality and technical performance, if that is there. If not, then it's expectations. Then we have to actually drill in and do the translation, what the expectations are from the client. In the outputs, we will often get then beautiful notions of progress, where we are against the estimations. So we compare it against the inputs, and then map it out, plan accordingly, schedule, and the costs, how much we should have spent against how much we have spent, or there's a third hidden notion that this is homework. Then job starts, job completion. This is often focused on tasks. and the element along the life cycle, and then engineering and design changes. Yeah, so when the scope, for example, changes, this is something that you can as well have in the outputs. Yeah, so it redefines as well your time planning, scheduling, and associated notions, or variation orders if it's very client driven. Yeah. Sometimes it's as well scope creep, yeah, but that is a different topic along those lines. But that is quite famous as well. Yeah. So when do we actually do this? This is of course at the pre-planned decision points. And normally, if you think back of our life cycle, we started with this conception phase of coming actually up with an idea, and this is literally that is already evaluated in the definition stage. You should arrive at a baseline that you can progress then. Yeah, where you actually set the milestones along the project life cycle that guide you and give you a feedback, yeah, on where you are in your deliverables that you are after. Quite frankly, the personal recommendation is really as soon as possible. I've worked a lot on the client side in projects. Actually, I still do that. Yeah, even my research projects, I normally have a cluster of companies that I'm delivering something for, and they often don't know what's available or what we're actually trying to achieve. So that is a big issue. If you have that, then you even want to start at the beginning, set kind of themes and packages that you can deliver, even at the conceptual stage. We do it, of course, continuously, regularly, to actually keep a certain focus as well on the project. Yeah, so this is a motivation aspect, again, along those notions. Yeah, set actually milestones as well. And then, of course, you go along it with a certain logic. So logic is really that first, if you take a building, you should really start with the foundation in most traditional cases. Although I've seen exceptions, I've seen actually people starting with the roof. Although that many construction people are not quite happy with this, but this is as well possible. But make the logic clear that everybody is as well in the loop where we are actually along this development, and what are the critical elements that come along. Now this is really what we try to map out here. Then at task completion as well recognized. So this is kind of like celebrating the gains that you have made. And when I say celebrate, this is not as heroic as it sounds. Don't go overboard with it, but recognize the achievements. And of course you have to for project control to be successful, you have to give it enough time before it's being delivered. Yeah, so if it's a reaction time for a major change, if you want a new wing, with an Airbus, then you have to plan this up front. Actually, Airbus 380, they just did this. Yeah, to actually change the wing, they had a forerun time of a year. So if you're controlling this, you have to actually make like the adjustments on the final agreed wing design a year up front, and possibly a week before you're actually going into it, that people can review it. And a week was very, I would probably give it a month, to be honest. Yeah, the similar in other industries where we have always like often assembled parts, like in construction. It's if you want elevator stairs or elevators is a good example, or in IT it may be actually the hardware, to actually assemble it accordingly. If you don't take standard components that need like a certain pre-run time to assemble the right thing. And of course, finally, it's as well at the end of the project to actually draw lesson learned, and adjust maybe as well your measurements that you are using for your project. So this can be very powerful. A lot of companies that are larger, they often have their own database of like identifying risk and as well assumed work times against it. So this is often, they often don't like to share this necessarily with us at the university, because we like, of course, to show it to the students openly, but it's often perceived as a competitive advantage having more accurate planning tools. In a snapshot, they actually inform your planning tools. Okay. how do we do this? I have just kept it as well very simple through dialogue. Traditionally in literature, I don't know why we are so keen on meetings in project management. This is probably true, but it's everything. Yeah, meetings can be as well site visits. It can be plant visit, going along with your project at the stages where you are meeting the people that are involved. This is all meetings, arguably, but what you are after is a dialogue, the sense making, that you're in the same picture. And that is with clients, parties involved in the project. Traditionally, we had here stakeholders, but it's as well contractor, supplier, or supply chain people, people, companies, organizations, And then we do so, of course, with scheduling, update communication tools that you are actually using. And then along this, this is already quite focused on quality improvement. It's, for example, value analysis. We have other tools. Earned value analysis is now one specific one that you have in the module with Claudio. But in reality, it's as well all the tools that come along with lean and associated quality assurance techniques. Calculate critical ratios. The critical ratios are, of course, meaningful to your project. Now you have to decide on that. If you want to look into this, this is often industry or even project specific, but we have a lot of literature in project management around that. I'll give you later on a few hints where you can find that. Then, of course, we set milestones. This is again the packages that I said. We have then reports or reporting mechanisms that bring the communication back to the team. Tests and inspections for quality parameters that are potentially already identified, so performing within a quality theorem. And then, of course, delivery or staggered delivery. So do you have like a lot of parallel activities that are being assembled at some point, or do you do it in a linear way? So are the critical path activities kind of happening at the same time, or is it one after the other? So those are often important questions. If you have stacked deliveries, this is always a little bit more exciting, because if one goes late, then it delays normally as well. The impact is actually not so big as in the linear delivery, but there are other issues then, because often the integration is then delayed, and that delays again the whole appearance of the product. So that there are pros and cons with both, but certain industries have your preferences. Then last but not least, the project management information system. This needs, of course, consistent updating. If you have tools or if you measure things that you're not updating, then they're probably not required for your project. I see that a lot actually, especially when we look at particular projects. With some of my distance learners, they're quite interested in applying it to their projects. And we look then at the tools that have been negotiated, and then we find halfway through the project that they haven't updated half of the tools. This is quite often happening, this happens quite often in industry. This is, of course, when you shouldn't have done it in the first place. If nobody uses it and it's not updated, it's kind of outdated from pre-planned, that is, of course, very bad. If you can integrate that, this is the whole idea. So for BIM, whoever's interested in that, in other industries we do that already. BIM, this means it has to be updated on the construction side. We don't do this yet. So that is maybe a hint for the future. In other industries we do that. If you go in aerospace, you can actually see which parts have been replaced or if measurements have been altered. So in planes they actually remeasure the size of the plane, and they have a variation. And if the variation is wrong, then normally the pilot is not that keen on getting into the plane. This is very important to recognize. Okay. So monitoring and control, a feedback process. Let's have a little bit a look at an example, to spin it a little bit out. And I have made extensive effort of trying to bring graphics in. So it's normally a quite simple one. I'm going here for a single learning loop. Alex has promised me that he does already a double feedback loop and a double learning curve and even a triple learning loop. Are those terms familiar? Yeah, okay, one person that says yes.
I heard about triple, yeah.
Okay, so this works on a single loop basis. Yeah, in some companies and some quality systems, we actually have multiple loops. Yeah, we try as well alternatives. Yeah, so in cars, do you want to build your car out of metals or carbon? Yeah, so it's both an option. This was material. Yeah, the kind of starting point of thinking about the materials. Yeah, so the double loop would consider alternatives. It gets more complicated. That is it. And if you integrate different solutions, it becomes complex. Because you have different benefits along the system, and that needs then more attention. Yeah? That was very technical focused, so we would have the engineers focusing on that. Yeah? But this is something that you would want to measure. Which products are we actually using along the line? Yeah? So monitoring is literally the question, as emphasized, our measurement versus the performance analysis. And some things are quite difficult to measure, or sometimes an alternative performance is delivering the same output. So this is a warning sign for us as project managers, but nonetheless, we basically we use our measurement to detect deviation and then inform. Now this is not alarm, we are not on track anymore. This is when you have to dig deeper and ask your team members, hey, why are we not progressing on that level? Can I support you? Is it a question of different elements? We have a look at that in a second. Yeah? And then it's of course control, so this was what I already emphasized. It's action, and then we have to revise our plans and everything that we are measuring. Yeah, so traditionally in the literature you will always see cash flow and schedules. This is just wonderful for project managers. Yeah, but there's more. So this is all I'm saying. And then you have of course correct deviations, and again then we were back at the old game along the life cycle. So normally, how does it start off? The bigger picture. It's often given the project is off track. This is this is not given in all projects. This is when project control comes into action. So we get given the project is off track. Yeah, we see it in our measurement, and we are like, oh, what can we do now? It's then one of those. This is very simplified. Yeah, so you can probably unfold that. But its project is behind time schedule or has exceeded the budget and the payments. We have already alterations in what we have been asked to pay and our pre-estimations from our supply chain. This is quite worrying, and that means often that they have potentially subcontracted actually their stuff as well. This is one potential source, but there are issues then on that level. Then quality of materials or finished work is below standard that you are aiming for. Or worse, your client comes in and looks at it and has like hidden standard expectations. That is often very interesting. Then you have like, of course, massive issues. So then the project is really off track, and productivity is lower than planned. So there are of course many more, but this is a starting point. Then you have this is a heroic 4Ms. This is why I adjusted the people into men. This is not true. It's as well women. I don't even know why we focus there on gender. This is not timely anymore. So resources for the project control. It's $sign again. Okay, this may change along the slides. I have actually altered this. So there we go. Super. Pound. And a little man bringing it in. Suggesting that there may be a solution here. So resources available for the project manager, for project control, traditionally come down to those four. In a way. It's of course as well ideas that replace potentially interconnections of those, and they are heroically summarized as well in manpower. So then we have of course the mechanisms and elements of project control. So we adjust the resources, adjust the project characteristics, size, scope, renegotiate potentially. If you have a good relationship with your client, this is a good opportunity, yeah, to get them involved and like pinpoint ideas where you think adjustment may be able to be made. Yeah, so scope creep, as I was mentioning, is quite a common thing. And then here we can break it down often in resources. So yeah, sorry, I've again translated that heroically. So capacity, capability, competencies, leadership team or supply chain kind of all qualify under man. Yeah, so here you want to ask yourself, do we have issues in the capacity of doing it? Yeah, this may be the machines don't run as sufficient anymore as what we assume. Yeah, when we bought them, they were a lot more sufficient. This is true for robotics if they are not very well maintained, or plant operation, or cranes, or that was a cranes is a bad example. But things can go wrong if you look at the recent media reports on some major projects in Brazil. Yeah, and those are terrible things. So in a way, you have compromised many aspects on that level. Yeah, capabilities is another one. We can often answer that with training or getting specialist teams in. Then competencies, of course, is another one. And hidden in that is as well leadership team, supply chain, or subcontractors that we are using to deliver it. Then I add as well again under the material notion. This is often done quite simple, and having worked in the Material Research Institute in Germany, I have slight issues with that, but for project managers I think it's okay. It's literally thinking about quantities. Are the quantities right? Do you have more waste in the production process than anticipated? And what about the quality? Do you actually hit the targets? And along it again, measurement that is required. Sometimes those are standardized materials. And then there's of course as well the question, do you use actually the right materials? This is when we are in the double loop learning. Yeah? So if materials are actually kind of considered at the project level. Do you want a sports car? We were back at automotive. But do you want one with a carbon chassis, or do you want a metal chassis? This is the question you may have to ask yourself. And this is then want versus need in terms of function. Yeah. Then of course as well equipment. I pointed already out. There's something with maintenance, fit for purpose, and then the quantity. Equipment can be as well quite drastic. We had that by a lot of recent projects that made actually the media. Sometimes the equipment doesn't yet exist. What do we do then? We phone a friend. Yeah, that sounded good, but I got just a few words there. Yeah. Look back in the history. All the standards, somebody invented it at some point, and often on the project. Yeah, there are a few famous projects that had basically a problem, and in the past, for example, construction projects, the cranes were an invention from the people that worked on the site and figured out that it's too heavy to carry it up. So we better try to invent a crane. Well, they knew the concept before, so they adapted it basically. This is the idea. Yeah, so sometimes we have to develop even equipment and leave the running times for that. Yeah, so those are unique aspects. Yeah, and you want to test it then as well if it's fit for purpose. And the quantity that you need to actually run it, of course. Yeah. Then last resource was the money, but I've already kind of changed that into financial reward, scale, release. Large projects, we see more and more that actually money is subsidized against like tax incentives. Yeah, so you don't pay tax, so that is accounted into the budget, or you have like special tax conditions. You know, think about the Olympics or World Cups. Yeah, they negotiate actually with the countries directly deals. Those are of course major projects. If you have smaller parts, you may still get subsidized. In some cases. Alex was outraged this morning. I thought it was hilarious. Porsche has released a new hybrid car, that hits all the sustainability targets, and it's £5,000 tax subsidized. and he thought that was not okay. Yeah, but I thought like, okay, so instead of 100,000, it's just 95,000, and 5,000 pounds is of course paid for by the taxpayer, because it's a green car. So, but anyway, so those are financial reward scale releases that have as well nowadays an impact. It shows that our financial industry has been a little bit more innovative recently. So we have a lot of stuff that we can use actually at the project level. Last but not least, project. Here it comes often. Sometimes it's worthwhile to think about reducing or increasing the project size and step into other pots or reducing literally the scope so that our pot is like superior, and then we can have repayments to the client. Now that is sometimes appreciated. Then reduce project scope. And last but not least, this should be always an option for the project manager. If you have a chaos project, that you can terminate it. If you don't have that power, then you are in big trouble in the first place. Then I would not necessarily put the project on my CV up front, or maybe with that clause. I wasn't able to stop the project. I thought it was crazy. So what does terminate project mean? Yeah, exactly. You basically bring it to an end, and you make sure that the rest of the resources either are used, basically are not used in that project that you have stopped. Yeah. There are as well payoffs with that. Yeah. So if you have already contractual arrangements, this is actually quite a big thing to do, but it's often in the interest, of course, of the outcome from the client and so forth. Yeah. Yeah, then last but not least, after that, we have brought our project back on track, and our output is then, of course, a new update. So this is really the heroic background to this, and the only other thing that I had with this is a question then, was the project control successful? So this is as well a question of communicating this, that your client is as well in the picture. Are you actually delivering what you are after? How can we actually tell when it's needed, project control? Well, in a way we are employed for it, so this is already an important notion to realize. But there are some general clues and specific clues. Again, this is kind of like a literature reading grid. So the traditional ones, performance and quality, again nowadays more under scope, is a current literature under project management. So those are general clues to us. Same like cost and time. Now this is every time what projects become famous for. But depending on your industry, there are specific clues. So that is quite important. So there are primitive indicators and then other indicators. I've broken it down a little bit to actually talk you through. Let's start with the performance actually. So this comes from Meredith and Mankel, 2006. Brilliant. They give an overview of what they actually steered. And they looked at performance. Here, again, very general, but you can actually specify it with this and on your project. Unexpected technical problems arise. Insufficient resources are unavailable. Insufficient resources are unavailable when needed. The idea is, of course, the resources are insufficient, or the resources are unavailable when needed. We have actually, there are a few industries that suffer a few aspects of that in particular. So construction, we have actually a finance issue at the moment. If you look at supply chains in larger projects, a lot of the supply chain has debt by their supply chain. What that means is somebody hasn't paid along the line. The client hasn't yet released the money, so hence the main contractor cannot pay the subcontractor or main contractor as yet in full. Now this is often in percentages, but in a few countries this means that a whole industry is actually indebted. So this is actually quite bad. Some small companies may go bust. Small companies have as well suspected that the large companies delay because they know if they are bust they don't have to pay. the full amount. So there as well some unethical suspicions, and it's a question that it's probably wise not to decide too harshly on this, but there's an element of that. Yeah. Then of course quality or reliability when problems occur. Owner or client requires change in technical specifications. We had that already. Interfunctional complications and conflicts arise. You have updated a new IT system, but actually all the drawings are done in a different format and cannot be updated. So those are classic ones that you will have, I think, in every industry at some point. Nowadays we try to avoid that, of course, because we have learned from the upgrading in that direction. And then market changes that increase or decrease the project value. This is in particular bad. Where we have a few industries that have done that quite successfully. Who has a manual? How would you describe that even? Who is using a camera with a film? Can I just ask? With there, I like that. Huh? So you have prevented that they went completely bust. Yeah, but you can see the others didn't raise their hand. They have now digital cameras or may not make photos at all. Yeah, that is as well an option, of course. But this means that the developments that went, for example, into those industries, they came to a sudden stop. Didn't really come as a surprise. They were kind of warned. They could see the trends already. Japan had already switched a few years before that completely. They had already lost whole markets, but it still had a massive impact on the projects that they were actually doing at the time. Yeah.
Reliability, you mean insurances?
Reliable. Yeah.
Quality or reliability, is that means like professional insurances or something?
Oh, I see. You work as well with the finance industry quite a bit. Yeah, reliability is as well a financial term. Yeah, it means that if something goes wrong, you take the risk ownership. Yeah, you will make it work.
Usually it covers with the insurance or something. Yeah.
Yeah, so you think already the step further, and this is a very wise notion. Yeah, in a project, if you have the reliability, yeah, and that's we are in a plane, yeah, and it's like the little part of the wing that breaks away when the plane starts and it falls down, and you're reliable for it. You don't just have to come with a new part of plane, of course. You have to pay the whole plane and probably insurance as well for the not insurance, but you have to pay the people that were affected by it. Yeah, so this is of course a lot. So what we do nowadays, yeah, we take an insurance out, and that is then a third party that guarantees us, in the case that we don't hit our quality and the plane falls down, we step in and pay that. And you pay on a monthly basis. Yeah, it's priced into your product. So this is already the financial notion, but the reliability in physical terms means if I'm a bricklayer, let's go back to construction because it's so visual. Yeah, if I lay the bricks here and I have messed up, like to put them with an overlap, yeah, they're all in one line and they fall to the left and right out, then my reliability is that I come back on the weekend and try it again. Yeah, this is literally my reliability. That's additional time spent. Yeah. So if you have a guarantee or reliability from a bank, this is literally they ask you to pay in parts, and they have assessed your project, how likely this is that goes wrong. Now this is back to Claudio's module. This is, we have read the plane actually doesn't come down that often, just in 1 in 100. So if you pay 2% on this part, then we can insure you, double. Normally insurance and banks, they have a good profit margin. Yeah, under 20% they don't really talk with you. This is like when you have to wait in the queue with like the people that just want to withdraw cash or something. Yeah, this is not appreciated. If you of course a bigger customer, then they come as well to visit you and sell you their product. Yeah, a very good question. Yeah. Yeah, market changes. Okay, we had that as well. Yeah, so this can have as well a massive impact. I have as well the cost, of course. Yeah, that this is again technical difficulties that require more resources. So in a way, it wasn't well priced. The costs have actually changed due to interconnections or hidden notions. Yeah, then scope of work increases. This was, for example, my bricklayer. Yeah, he has not set the right brick connections. Verbund. Oh, yeah, what is that in English? So there are different ways of laying bricks, and they interconnect, and it's a fourth triangle that you're often after. Yeah. But okay, never mind. So scope of work increases, then bid amount. So accepted maybe for contract award is too low. If you're interested in that project, Claudio has just bidded for something like that in America. He's doing actually a research art project, and they have accepted him. But then, and as well, the costing that was really done on a honest account, and then it came back and they said, you know, actually, we don't want your project where you want to install it now. We want it floating over a river. But hey, wait, this changes everything, yeah? So the costing is not accurate anymore, yeah? So, yeah. So this happens, just be aware of that. And, yeah, then you have issues with that. And then reporting of the monitoring results are poor or late. Project budgeting for contractor cash flows not done right. Now this is in particular bad. This is often the guesstimations. You have that in many guides. Make sure that you have actually the right locality. Yeah? If you go in with certain quantities, sometimes it's just a factor. Yeah? So if you're constructing something in London, it's normally a little bit more expensive than constructing the same thing here in Tynemouth, yeah? Or in Newcastle. Yeah? So there are notions like that. Same, yeah, with internationally speaking, yeah, if you manufacture something in a country that is renowned for their capacity and skills in that area, it's often a little bit more expensive. No? This is just by implication. And then, of course, last but not least, cash flows was one, and then changes in market prices of the inputs. Yeah? So this is another big one. Let me do one more, and then we have a short break. We have as well. No, actually, let's make the. Have I lost one? I've lost time. That is really bad, isn't it? Okay, never mind. I will find time quickly, but we will make a break now. Any questions at that point? Okay, 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, super. Thank you.